Britain in the 1960s was alive. The streets were louder, the music was bolder, and the cars were something else entirely. This was the decade when British engineers stopped being cautious, when small workshops in Coventry and Norfolk and Surrey started building machines that frightened the established order. Machines that turned up at Le Mans, at Goodwood, at the Nürburgring, and made the Italians pay attention. Ferrari was the name everyone feared. The benchmark. The red standard everything else was measured against. But Britain, quiet, determined, inventive Britain, was building cars in the 1960s that could have changed that conversation entirely. Cars that history forgot. Cars that deserved so much better. Today, we count down 10 of them. And number 1 came closer to beating Ferrari than anyone ever gave it credit for. Let us begin. Number 10. The Turner Sports, 1959 to 1966. Turner Sports Cars. We begin with a name almost nobody recognizes. And that is precisely why it belongs on this list. Jack Turner built his cars in Wolverhampton, by hand, in small numbers. The Turner Sports was tiny, barely 1,000 pounds in weight, and used a series of small British engines depending on the year: Ford, Climax, BMC, whatever was available and suitable. But the chassis Jack Turner designed was exceptional. Light, stiff, and beautifully balanced. The car handled with a precision that shamed vehicles costing 3 times the price. At club racing level, which is where most Turners lived, it was devastatingly quick. Drivers who found one rarely forgot the experience. And yet, Turner Sports Cars closed in 1966, quietly, without ceremony, leaving behind a handful of cars that deserved a far larger stage. Number 9. The Gilbern Genie, 1966 to 1969. Gilbern Cars. Gilbern was Wales's only car manufacturer. That fact alone deserves a moment. The Genie, introduced in 1966, used a Ford Essex V6 engine producing around 141 horsepower in a fiberglass body that weighed almost nothing. The result was a car of genuine performance, 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds, a top speed approaching 120 miles per hour. But the Genie offered something beyond performance. It offered character. The interior was well appointed and genuinely comfortable. The driving position was considered. The car felt like it had been designed by people who actually used roads, rather than people who merely built vehicles. Gilbern sold fewer than 200 Genies, each one hand-assembled in Lantwitt-Fardray. Each one slightly better than it had any right to be. Number 8. The Warwick GT, 1960 to 1962. Warwick Cars. The Warwick arrived with serious ambitions. A fiberglass body styled with genuine flair. A Buick V8 engine, later a standard unit, offering real muscle for a British sports car of the era. The Warwick looked like it belonged on a continental racing circuit. Long bonnet, wide stance, the proportions of something considerably more expensive. But Warwick Cars was underfunded from the beginning. Production never exceeded a handful of cars, and by 1962, just 2 years after launch, the company was gone. The Warwick GT remains one of the great might-have-beens of British motoring, a car that looked like a future that never arrived. Number 7. The Peerless GT, 1957 to 1962. Peerless cars. The Peerless GT predates the swinging 60s by a year or two, but its story belongs entirely to that decade's spirit of ambition. Built around a tubular steel space-frame chassis advanced for its time, the Peerless used a Triumph TR3 engine producing around 100 horsepower. The fiberglass body was sleek and purposeful. 4 seats, genuine 4 seats, in a package that weighed under 1,000 kilograms. Motoring journalists who drove it in period were uniformly impressed. The handling was precise. The performance respectable. The value extraordinary. But Peerless ran out of money before the world caught up with what they had built. Fewer than 325 cars were made. The company became Warwick, our previous entry, and then that ended too. Britain's loss. Twice over. Number 6. The Elva Courier. 1958 to 1969. Elva cars. Frank Nichols founded Elva in a garage in Hastings, which is exactly the kind of sentence that belongs in 1960s Britain. The Courier was Elva's road car, a lightweight, open sports car using various Ford and MG engines across its long production run. What made the Courier special was its honesty. No pretension, no unnecessary weight, no attempt to be anything other than exactly what it was, a fast, light, nimble British sports car that rewarded drivers who understood what they had. Elva also built racing cars that competed and won at the highest levels of motorsport. Jackie Stewart drove an Elva Formula 3 car early in his career. The Courier deserved the same fame as the Lotus Elan. It never got it. Nobody has ever satisfactorily explained why. Number 5. The Marcos 1800, 1964 to 1969. Marcos cars. Jem Marsh and Frank Costin built the Marcos 1800 from wood. Not as a gimmick, as an engineering decision. The monocoque chassis was constructed from marine plywood, light, rigid, and structurally excellent. On top of it sat a fiberglass body of genuinely striking proportions, low, wide, and unmistakably purposeful. The Volvo 1.8-liter engine produced around 114 horsepower. In a car this light, the result was electric. 0 to 60 in under 9 seconds, a top speed of around 115 miles per hour. Contemporary road tests placed the Marcos 1800 alongside cars costing significantly more. Colin Chapman, who built Lotus and understood lightweight construction better than almost anyone, reportedly examined a Marcos and expressed genuine admiration for what Marsh and Costin had achieved. That, from Chapman, was not a small thing. Number 4. The Trident Clipper, 1965 to 1978. Trident began life as a TVR, which already tells you something about its potential. When TVR could not continue developing the car, the design was acquired by Trident Cars, a small company with large ideas. The Clipper used a Ford V6, or, in later versions, a Ford V8 engine. The body was styled in Italy by Giovanni Michelotti, the man responsible for some of the most beautiful cars of the post-war era. The result was a car of extraordinary visual drama, low, wide, aggressive in the way that only Italian design can be aggressive, with menace that somehow remained entirely elegant. Performance was strong, presence was absolute. But Trident never achieved the production numbers that would have given it the reputation it deserved. Today, most people who see a Trident Clipper for the first time assume it is something Italian, something famous, something that should have been everywhere. They are right about the last part. Number 3. The Bond Equipe GT, 1963 to 1970. Bond cars is remembered today, if it is remembered at all, for 3-wheeled economy vehicles. That reputation is both deserved and deeply unfair, because the Bond Equipe GT was something else entirely. Built on a Triumph Herald chassis, using Triumph's Spitfire engine in later versions, the Equipe offered genuine sports car performance in a package of surprising elegance. The fiberglass body was handsome and well-proportioned, the interior was comfortable and properly finished, and the Spitfire-derived engine, tuned and revised for the Equipe, gave the car a character that went well beyond its modest origins. Bond sold several thousand Equipes across the model's life, each one bought by someone who had found a sports car that the mainstream had somehow missed. Those owners knew something the market did not. Number 2. The TVR Griffith 200, 1963 to 1967, TVR Engineering. The TVR Griffith 200 was not designed by committee. It was not the result of market research. It was the result of one American, Jack Griffith, looking at a TVR Grantura and asking a very simple question: what happens if we put a Ford V8 in this? The answer was spectacular and slightly terrifying. The 4.7-liter Ford Hypo V8 produced around 271 horsepower in a car that weighed barely 1,600 pounds. The power-to-weight ratio was, by any reasonable calculation, absurd. 0 to 60 in under 5 seconds, a top speed approaching 160 miles per hour. In 1963, in something built by a small company in Blackpool, American muscle journalists who tested it ran out of language. British motoring writers who drove it came back pale. Not from fear, though fear was entirely appropriate, but from the realization that something built in Lancashire had just embarrassed almost everything else on the road. A Griffith 200 was not refined. It made no promises of refinement. What it promised was honesty. Raw, absolute, completely undiluted honesty about what a sports car could be when weight was removed and power was added and nothing else was allowed to get in the way. TVR built around 300 of them, each one slightly different, each one more than most drivers were ready for. The ones who were ready never forgot it. Number 1. The Lola GT, 1963. And here we are, number 1, the car that could have beaten Ferrari, not as a claim, as a matter of documented racing history. Eric Broadley designed the Lola GT in 1963, a mid-engined Ford V8 GT car built to compete at the highest level of endurance racing. When Ford saw it, when Ford's engineers examined what Broadley had built in a small facility in Bromley, they did not offer polite praise. They offered a contract. The Lola GT became the direct foundation for the Ford GT40, the car that went to Le Mans, the car that broke Ferrari's dominance, the car that won 4 consecutive times from 1966 to 1969. That victory, those 4 victories, began in Bromley, with Eric Broadley, with a small British company that most people have never heard of. Ferrari did not lose to Ford at Le Mans. Ferrari lost to an idea that started in Britain, and the Lola GT was that idea, in its purest, original, most brilliant form. These 10 cars did not get the recognition they deserved. Some ran out of money, some ran out of time. Some were simply overlooked by a world that was not paying close enough attention, but they were not failures. They were the work of engineers and builders who refused to accept that Britain could not compete with the best in the world. And in most cases, they were right. The 1960s produced some of the greatest sports cars Britain ever built. Not all of them were famous. The best ones rarely needed to be. Subscribe, because there is plenty more history worth remembering.